it's really difficult to talk about this kind of music, especially with the two guys who are making it. Let's start with a very simple question. Let's start with Arve. Arve, I think we don't have to find a name for the music you're playing, but perhaps you can give us a rough impression of all the inspirations that come together in what you're playing.
Well, all of us have been playing music for 40 years, approximately. Don't you think so? You started to play piano when you were quite young, and I played the trumpet and a little bit piano, and so it's like when we work with this type of music, this chamber music, I would like to call it chamber music, and it's the technique we are using is improvisation, and what we actually do is to orchestrate, so and compose in the same moment. And I think for me, all the stuff I've been doing and listening to is at some point coming out through the music that we do. And I try not to put any limitation on what I do in a moment. So sometimes I can do things that Jan can find a little bit crazy, and then he has to help me out of it. So it's like everything can happen, and I think a lot of classical music that we may listen to can come through us and out through the music when we play together, as we did tonight. There were a few sequences there, but I got this idea of this is more like classical, contemporary-ish music. And at the last encore, before you came in with your composition, there was this Arabic or something kind of inspiration from there, which I also find quite attractive, the music. And you know, so the inspiration can come from many different places, and I don't want to put limitations. Sometimes I have to do it because I can't do, you know, the weirdest things that comes to my mind. So, yeah. But I think, you know, if you want to be if you try and be on stage and try to be honest, and you just try to follow the ideas and the flow that comes up to you. So Jan can start on a sound, and I can, oh yes, this gives me this idea, and then I go into it, and after some seconds he can change it to something else. Okay, then I follow him into that, or I go with my idea. So, you know, it can come from anywhere, I suppose.
So if you think of traditions that inspired you, you think of limits, and you try to play without any limits on stage.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's really improvised music, improvised and orchestrated, two of them. So let's say if it is orchestrated, it is kind of composed also.
Yes, I mean, we compose on stage. We have a lot of things sometimes prepared in our computers. We can have sounds there from the latest album. And there were one sequence with some church organ in the middle of the concert, I suppose it was. So that's a sequence of music that's also on the latest album. And then we can bring in this, but it was quite different from the record version. So, you know, that's the way it is. Yeah.
So, Jan, what is your inspiration? And, well, one very sharp question. I can imagine improvising on a guitar. I can imagine improvising on a trumpet or a drum set. But you are playing a sampler. What kind of musical instrument is it, and how do you improvise on this funny machine?
Yes, I'm trying to make that stupid thing live. Basically, it's and I think that that tradition comes from someone like Holger Schukai, who passed away this year. that kind of jerking around with electronics or dictaphones or whatever is available, and to see if you can make something interesting in the moment. So it's more of the process is interesting, I think, and of course for me, it's a privilege to be able to play with these fantastic musicians, for such a long time. I have to say this because two of them are sitting over there. Otherwise, I wouldn't have said this. But I think that it's also a privilege to be able to work with an instrument that is not recognized as an instrument, that it doesn't have the cultural baggage of something like a piano or a cello or the four strings, and or the piano. I mean, I used to compose on the piano, from when I was a child and then upwards in my adolescence, and I noticed that my fingers fell on the same keys, decades after decades, and I was thinking, my God, is this my life? And then I found another way of doing something that could be interesting all the time for myself, at least. So I discovered this little fellow over here in 1996, and it's been with me ever since. This is probably my 7th or 8th, because I tend to break them. But it's fantastic because now there are some samples in it, but then I turn it off and there's nothing, and then I can turn it off on again, and then there will be an orchestra, or there will be a ukulele player. That it's very. It can be anything.
It can be anything, and the funny thing when you're listening to this music of your quartet is, if you hear a trumpet, it's not necessarily Arve who's playing it, and if you hear drums, it's not Audun. It's sometimes just the sampler who plays it. Do you like mixing up with other instruments?
Oh yes, and I think that the combination of the beauty and the beast is always interesting. Of course, me being the beauty and the others the beast here. But sorry. Oh, you won. But it's the combination of the acoustics, electrics, and the electronics.
And what is so fascinating working with this type of musician, and Jan is a pop musician. When he started, he was a pop singer. He was on the Norwegian radio and TV, dancing and doing the pop stuff. And that's quite interesting to look at that history from the classical stuff when you were young into the pop business, and then became a fantastic producer for a lot of Norwegian pop artists. And then in 96, 97, you met Audun Kleive in a constellation with Bugge Wesseltoft, DJ Strandfruit, and who else? It was a few more that made up in the fiction concept.
It was Eivind Aarseth.
Of course, Eivind, sorry. And all these guys have made their, direction. Eivind went out with this Electric Noir, his concept, and with his band, Audun with his Generator X. You went out doing your sample, and later on this punkt that we will maybe talk about will come up. So there's the directions. You guys, and Bugge has of course, his career. So all these guys have been sort of, doing a really, really big effort to bring Norwegian jazz abroad and to bring Norwegian jazz to a different place. Because the tradition of Norwegian music, the more jazz improv scene, comes from the ECM recordings sessions, with starting out with Jan Garbarek and Arle Andersen, Jon Christensen, Jon Balke, and all these fantastic musicians that have been releasing records ever since. So everything, with this type of music, all these musicians picking up traditions from Norway, picking up, ideas from the classical music scene. The latest album of Jon Balke is inspired by, Middle East music and Baroque and all this Renaissance stuff. It's a mix of loads of stuff. And then playing with Jan, when I then can play a trumpet tone into his computer and into his sampler, and suddenly he can start to orchestrate, as he did a couple of times through this concert, that you start to add chorals around me. So I can suddenly be surrounded by my own trumpet playing, but he is orchestrating it. It's a very obvious and very fantastic way of working with music in the very moment. And instead of playing these chords on a piano, you play them on your computer. And you can even play them backwards. So it starts to, so my trumpet tone, D can be
I just want to add a thing. I'm sure we should probably move forward, but it's interesting to see, because we've been playing together for so many years, and this goes for Arve and myself, but also for Eivind and Audun, is that we tend to copy each other. So if we do something, electronically or acoustically, we tend to adopt and merge or like mutate, which is interesting to see also that there is something that is done electronically that you transfer over to your acoustic instrument. And this is the learning point that I think is very interesting.
It's about how to play together. And there are very strange ways to play together. Sometimes I had the impression that, well, you double up what he is playing, but you are also orchestrating some kind of silence sometimes. So it's all what you're playing is about sound, not loudness, not rhythm, but sound. Huh?
Oh yes, but the timing is crucial. Mm-hmm. The timing is everything, I think. So also in the very slow sort of movements or in the slow parts, it's to be precise. Also with something that is, that it sounds like a texture or something, but it's the combinations of these textures or the starting point or the end point, which is actually where to be precise. And without the preciseness, it becomes kind of a wishy-washy thing.
I usually try to think that to be clear, and precise when I play a tone, and maybe I keep my eyes open. Sometimes I can just go into this sort of world, closing my eyes, playing, But when I, have Audun on the side here, I can see what he's doing, and suddenly he's just, and I can follow his. When he's going to hit the cymbal or drum or something, I can just see his energy. That can be helpful to me to orchestrate my playing along with him. Also looking at when Jan is doing some, okay, and then it's a lot of energy there. And then you can sort of think also that this concert that we played, it could have been written on a score, and then you could just think that you are playing pre-written music. In that way, it makes what I do a bit clearer. So I know that when Eivind is going up with his high, okay, then I can follow it. I can dub it. I can maybe also play fifth under or something. I can orchestrate his. When I see his hands going up there, I know that I can follow his curves and his structures. And then I can also sort of try to be more precise, just looking at the score, imaginary score. So it's very helpful if you try to be thinking like that when you play this improvised music, because then you can be more precise about what you do and take away some rubbish that you don't need actually. And
so there's a kind of imaginary score. Not to look at, but to create a kind of precision.
Yes, but if you look at if you look at all music, these guys from Ensemble Modern every day, they play very advanced music, written very often. It can be, very precise notation, or it can be more graphic stuff that you can try to blend and bend tones and stuff. But I have to sort of be accurate because it's a composer that had this idea of making this. And we have 4 of us on stage that compose at the same time. And then you have to be clear, and so we can follow each other's ideas, and so I can, understand what Jan is going to do the next moment, maybe, and then be shadowing his playing. So,
and you can influence what he'll be doing, because everybody is looking at everybody.
Yeah.
I would like to ask you something about your 2 trumpets and your collection of strange mouthpieces. You were playing with a bass clarinet mouthpiece, and you were playing without any mouthpiece sometimes, and sometimes with a quite normal mouthpiece. What makes you choose these different instruments?
To orchestrate. That's my answer to that. It's like finding different sounds. I mean, sound is a very crucial thing, an important thing for all of us. And I think for trumpet players, if you look to the classical music, I mean, in many instrumentalists, they have this idea of how the instruments should sound like. I look at my trumpet as a tool, and I look at it as a possibility for creating new sounds, and maybe sounds that there's a lot of sounds that I haven't produced yet. Maybe if I can live for a few more years, I will be able to do a few more sounds. Let's hope so. And it is like using this instrument as a tool, and makes a lot of possibilities, and it's a lot of orchestrations I can do then. If you listen to trumpet players in classical orchestras, very often they sound the same. This is my statement in a way, because I think the classical education in Norway, in Germany, all over the place is quite boring. They're fantastic trumpet players and trombone players and saxophone players and clarinet players, but they very often sound the same because the orchestration, they play music, Chopin, or they play Stravinsky, and they play all these instruments, all these composers, and people have an idea what this is going to sound like. So then the trumpets and the horns and they have this idea of what is the best sound for playing this music, and that's fine. But there's so much more to explore, and I think the classical education has to change, and maybe some places you have good teachers who are pushing it. But I mean, if you look to the more contemporary ensembles, Musikfabrik or Ensemble Moderne, where you have to play very composed, advanced, contemporary music, then you have to just forget about playing just this traditional trumpet playing. You have to be innovative, and you have to challenge yourself. And I think to me, that's more interesting. But of course, it's fantastic to hear orchestra play Brahms or these kind of things as well. But I think it's a little bit, education-wise, I think it's quite boring what's happening in Europe and America and whatever.
Jan, I have one question about not about sound at this moment, but your very special festival you invented, 15, 20 years ago in Kristiansand, the Punkt Festival. Perhaps I should just explain something about it. It is a festival where there's a real jazz band playing on stage, and 15 minutes later there is a sampling concert, because there was somebody who sampled all that they played, and the concert starts anew in another venue. And it is quite a different concert because it's electronic. So you have a double festival there. Why did you invent this?
probably to get more work, but mainly because of curiosity. What would happen if you program a group of people performing in one room, and in the other room there are people sampling out bits and pieces, and maybe acoustic players listening to melodic lines, or drummers listening to rhythm patterns, and guitarist or keyboard player listening to chords, or it could even be a conductor listening to textures and write them very quickly. And then immediately afterwards, this music is being deconstructed and reconstructed by this new team of players. And I think that things like that could easily become just a gimmick. That's the danger of it, that it becomes like I have the new tool and you don't. But what we were so interested in to see what would happen, and because of if you have artistic directors who are musicians themselves, this might work in a better way. So we were very specific in our programming, and we did it. It didn't come a lot of people in the first year. Only 19 people, and it was like a 500 seat or something. But now we've lasted was our 13th year. And we've had a lot of different people coming and playing, and everything from classical and contemporary musicians to rock, or to folk music or jazz or whatever. And I think this also reflects maybe the mentality of the Norwegian people and the Norwegian music scene, is that it's a very flat structure. It's everybody's helping each other and playing on each other's records. And it seems like that is a good way of living, kind of, to share. And it seems like this is also happening now in the art world. I was at the Biennale down in Venice now this summer, and everything was about sharing. It's like the new generation of artists are really concerned about this. It's not like it was in the 70s where it's like, it's me, but more about sharing. So even though I started this festival together with my colleague Eric Honoré, it's very much an effort that Arve and Audun and Eivind and a lot of other musicians are involved in. And this is not only Norwegian musicians, but it's an international family of people.
Peter Schwalm.
Peter Schwalm.
He was at the festival.
Peter.
Hi. Guten Abend. Wie geht's?
So fantastic.
So there's a lot of musicians from all kinds of styles that have been merged together, and I think that's it's fantastic. Also, we can have jam sessions afterwards. You played drums. It was great fun. Thank you. And so I think this you said about the Norwegian music scene. With
we look at different structures in organizing, kind of organizing things.
So there you have these folk musicians that can suddenly play on jazz record, and jazz musicians collaborating with, it's a mixed people crossing the borders, The genres is not that important. We just look at it more like just music and sounds, and I think that's a good way to describe the Norwegian scene.
There is a musician who is also a writer, piano player and writer, Ketil Bjørnstad, who wrote 3 novels about this Norwegian musical scene. I think I thank you too. I think you have worked enough for tonight, and thank you very, very much.
Questions from 2, 3 questions.
Okay. Wenn jemand Fragen hat, bitte.
It's to you. Since I play the trumpet myself, I was very surprised by the different tunes you produced with once the clarinet, was it clarinet or saxophone?
Saxophone.
Saxophone, a mouthpiece. And what fascinated me the most was playing without a mouthpiece. Do you use the same technique, like what if you would play with one, or I'm gonna get a demonstration.
Demonstrate.
Oh, it's exactly the same.
So you just take off the mouthpiece.
But it's
and
not
play.
the same.
It's a very different instrument. Yes, it is.
Yes, it's okay. It's more comfortable.
But it's, I use this. And all you can do with this one, but you can take it away, and then you can. And then you can use this type of vibrato instead of this brass band thing from England. But you could also do that. So I mean, there's so many different ways of combining techniques of things. But it's like just take it off. And this is a Yamaha trumpet, a large bore, which make it a little bit more comfortable. But this is it Getzen and Bach. It's like stamping out lips. So that's a very hopeless instrument. So I prefer Yamaha.